Glory stood outside his window with her hand raised to knock, and froze when she heard her own name followed by a laugh.
Once she's CEO, I set up the contract, take what I need, and disappear.
She lowered her hand, turned around, and walked back into the night without making a sound. 2 days later, she knocked on that same door, dressed like she had nothing to her name.
What is this? You told me your family was wealthy.
Before we go further, if stories like this, the kind that make you sit up and say, "Wait, what?" are your thing, follow along so you don't miss where this one goes. 'Cause it gets messier before it gets better. 3 months earlier, Glory had been a different person online, a bright, ambitious final-year student, chatting late into the night with a man who seemed to have everything figured out. Good job, good face, good words. She told Minjun about her father's companies back home, about the inheritance waiting for her, about the CEO title she'd step into once her degree was done. She told him because she trusted him, and trust, to her, had always meant honesty in both directions. She didn't know his charm was a costume. She didn't know his questions about her family's business weren't curiosity, they were research. The night she overheard him laughing about the fake contract, something in her went very still. Not devastated. Still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a person decides exactly what they're going to do next. She didn't cry that night. She didn't call him and scream. She went home, packed the plainest clothes she owned, and waited 2 days. When she showed up at his door dressed like someone with nothing, Minjun opened it expecting the woman he'd bragged about to his friend, the CEO's daughter, the future paycheck. Instead, he saw someone who looked like she'd borrowed her outfit from a stranger. His face twisted in confusion, then disgust. "What is this?" he demanded. "You told me your family was wealthy." She lowered her eyes, let her voice shake just enough. "I'm sorry. I exaggerated. I just wanted you to like me." He didn't even try to soften the blow. He told her to leave, called her pathetic under his breath, and shut the door before she'd taken 2 steps back. She smiled the whole walk home. Minjun, on the other hand, spent the rest of that week in a mood his friends couldn't ignore. He barely touched his food when they met up, kept replaying the encounter in his head, muttering about how much time he'd wasted on a broke girl playing dress-up online. His friends laughed, not with him, at him. "Wait, so let me get this straight," one of them said, setting his drink down slowly. "You were trying to run a scam on her and she played you first?" "It's not like that," Minjun snapped. "It's exactly like that," another one said, grinning. "You wanted her money. She wanted out. She got out clean, and you're the one sitting here sulking. Case closed, man. You lost." Minjun didn't find it funny. He left early that night, the laughter following him out the door long after he was gone. He never knew he'd been played. He never knew she'd heard every word through that window. He just thought he'd dodged a broke girl with big dreams. Meanwhile, she'd gotten exactly what she came for, an exit with no scene, no tears, no explanation owed to a man who didn't deserve one. Back home, her father's company was already preparing for the transition. Glory stepped into the role, and by the time the ink dried on the papers, she wasn't a student anymore. She was the CEO. Young, sharp, and done, completely done, with men who wanted a title before they wanted her. Being the only child came with its own weight. Her father, Chief Adewale, had built his empire with the quiet hope that she'd inherit not just the company but the discipline behind it. Her mother worried about softer things, whether she was eating well, whether she was lonely in that big house now that she'd moved back permanently, whether she'd ever bring someone home to meet them. Sunday afternoons became a ritual. Her father would sit with his tea, going over reports she'd already memorized, quizzing her out of habit more than necessity. Her mother would hover nearby, half listening, half waiting for the moment she could steer the conversation somewhere more personal. "So," her mother said one Sunday, setting a plate of fruit between them, "when do we get to meet this fiancé you keep pretending doesn't exist?" Glory laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "There's no fiancé, Mom." "Then let us help you," her father said, not looking up from his papers. Chief Balogun's son just returned from London. Good boy, good family, and he already runs half of his father's shipping business. It would be a strong match for the company and for you. I don't need a match, Dad. I need time. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. We're not rushing you, my love. We just want to see you happy before we're old and gray. You're all we have. Glory smiled at that, a real one this time, even as she deflected the conversation towards something safer. But the words stayed with her longer than she let on, the quiet, constant hope in her parents' eyes every time the subject came up. Love, she had decided, could wait. Maybe forever. Fate, as it turns out, doesn't check anyone's calendar. She met him on an ordinary evening outside a plaza near her office. A man sitting on the curb, clothes worn thin, a small cup in front of him with a few coins inside. Most people walked past him without looking. She didn't. She bought him a warm plate of food, sat with him for a few minutes, asked his name. Seo Jun, he told her. She had no idea the man in front of her had counted that same handful of coins into his own cup that morning. No idea he owned buildings taller than the one she worked in. He wasn't hungry. He was testing something, whether anyone in this city could still see a person and not a bank account. She passed the test without knowing she was taking it. What she didn't account for was her own staff walking past that same plaza one evening. Two of them spotted her sitting on the curb beside a man in torn clothes, laughing at something he'd said, sharing a plate of food like they'd known each other for years. By the next morning, it was the worst-kept secret in the building. Did you see our CEO yesterday? Sitting with a beggar. Like sitting. On the ground. Maybe she's doing charity work. Charity work doesn't usually come with that much laughing. The gossip followed Glory around corners for a week, hushed conversations that stopped the moment she walked into a room, glances she pretended not to notice. She never addressed it. She didn't owe anyone an explanation for kindness. She'd once asked him, half joking, half serious, whether he'd ever consider working for her company. You're clearly smart, she said. Sharper than most people I interview. What are your credentials? Let me see what I can do. Seo Jun smiled but shook his head. I don't think it would be proper for me to work under you. Not yet, anyway. Why not? Because when the truth comes out, and it will, I don't want anyone saying you gave me a position because you felt sorry for me or because of anything else. He held her gaze a beat longer than necessary. Just give me time. I promise I won't be begging much longer. She laughed it off, not understanding the weight behind his words, filing it away as another one of his odd, quiet certainties. Small evenings like that stacked into weeks. Small conversations turned into longer ones. She started bringing extra food without being asked. He started waiting for her differently than he waited for anyone else, like her showing up mattered more than the meal itself. There was, of course, a cost to living two lives. One afternoon, Seojin's assistant called him in a near panic. An emergency board meeting had been moved up with no warning, investors already in the building, and he was still 3 streets away in the same tattered jacket he wore on the curb. Changing meant going home first, and there wasn't time. He walked straight into his own office building looking like he'd wandered in off the street, and the lobby went dead silent. Security actually stepped toward him before recognizing his face. His executives, already seated in the boardroom, watched their chairman's son shuffle past the glass doors in torn sleeves and dust on his shoes, and no one said a word, mostly because no one knew what to say. He disappeared into his private office, changed into the suit hanging behind his door in under 3 minutes, and walked into that boardroom like nothing had happened. Nobody dared ask. His assistant told the story for weeks afterward to anyone who'd listen. If you think that's the last time his double life almost caught up with him, you'd be wrong, because the closest call was still coming, and it happened with Glory standing right next to him. She'd insisted on taking Seojun shopping one afternoon while he was still playing the beggar, determined to get him at least one decent shirt with the little money she could spare. She picked, without knowing it, the flagship store his own family owned. The staff recognized him instantly and nearly said his name out loud at full volume before he caught one manager's eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. The woman blinked, recovered fast, and played along like she'd never seen him before in her life, ringing up a shirt he could have bought the entire store with, thanking Sir like he was any other customer. Glory never noticed a thing. She was too busy insisting he try on a second shirt. They had a favorite restaurant too, a small, unremarkable place near the plaza where he used to sit. He'd been a regular there long before she ever laid eyes on him, ordering the cheapest thing on the menu just to blend in, sometimes not ordering at all. When she started bringing him there as her guest, the owner recognized him immediately and nearly gave the game away with excessive hospitality until Seo-jun quietly asked him to treat him like everyone else. Then the news broke. Glory's face was suddenly everywhere. Headlines about the young CEO who'd taken over her father's empire, interviews, a magazine cover. Min-jun saw it and felt something curdle in his stomach. She hadn't been lying. She'd been telling the truth the entire time, and he'd thrown it away with his own hands. He showed up at her office first, and this time she didn't avoid him. She let him sit, let him talk, and when he tried the old charm again, she cut through it calmly. "You don't have to pretend, Min-jun. I heard you that night. Through your window. Every word, the contract, the money, the part where you said you'd never marry an African." His face drained of color. "Glory, So the poor girl who showed up at your door 2 days later," she continued, watching him carefully. "That was me giving you exactly what you wanted to see. And you gave me exactly what I needed, an easy way to walk away." He didn't apologize. He got angry instead, the way people do when they're caught rather than sorry, trying to twist the story, insisting she owed him a real conversation, that she couldn't just decide he was the villain and disappear. He reached for her arm to keep her from leaving, his voice rising. That's when Seo-jun stepped in. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed himself between them and said, "Let go of her." Min-jun, humiliated and cornered, turned his anger on Seo-jun instead. He shoved him back, demanding to know who he thought he was. Security intervened before it went further that day, and Min-jun left with nothing but his pride in pieces. He came back a second time, trailing Glory's car through traffic and cornering her outside a small restaurant near the plaza, the same street corner where Seo-jun used to sit with his cup of coins. Felt almost fitting that it happened there. Min-jun grabbed her wrist this time, and Seo-jun's calm disappeared entirely. What followed didn't take long. Min-jun ended up on the pavement outside the restaurant he'd once mocked people for eating at, and he never came looking for Glory again. That night, sitting across from the man who just defended her without asking a single question first, Glory told him the rest, the plan, the disguise, the 2 days she waited before knocking on that door. Seo-jun listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening more with every detail. He didn't promise her revenge. He didn't need to. Weeks later, without her ever knowing the source, a story began circulating in business circles, precise, quiet, undeniable. Details about a man who tried to run a fake contract scheme on a rising CEO. Partners who once trusted Min-jun started pulling away. Deals fell through quietly. He lost more than her that night at his door. He lost the version of himself people used to believe in. Glory noticed the timing. She didn't ask questions yet. Their evenings together kept happening, slowly becoming something neither of them named out loud. But Seo-jun's world wasn't only made of quiet dinners and disguises. His father's health had been declining for months, and the Kong family home had become heavier with every visit. "You're not getting any younger, Seo-jun," his father said one evening, voice weaker than it used to be but no less firm. "I want to see you settled before I go. Bring this woman you keep disappearing to see. Let your mother and I meet her properly." "It's not that simple, father." "Nothing worth having ever is," his father said, coughing into his hand. "But I don't have the luxury of waiting for simple anymore." His mother said less, but her eyes said enough every time the subject came up, a quiet plea disguised as patience. Seo-jun carried that weight into every evening he spent with Glory, torn between wanting to give his father peace and needing Glory to fall in love with him, not his name. One evening, he finally asked her to follow him somewhere. She assumed it was another quiet dinner. Instead, the car stopped in front of a mansion with a gate longer than her office building's driveway, security stationed like sentries at every corner. "Where are we?" she asked. "Be patient," he said, and walked her to the door himself. He turned to her once they were inside and said simply, "Welcome to my house." Something in her chest went cold. "You men are all the same," she said, backing away. "Liars. Scammers. Fraud." And she left before he could say another word, the old wound splitting open like it had never healed at all. He gave her space, 3 days of it, before showing up at her office, this time with no disguise left to hide behind. The staff nearly dropped what they were holding when he walked through the front doors. The same beggar they'd gossiped about weeks earlier, now dressed in a suit that cost more than most of their salaries combined, security trailing him at a respectful distance. Whispers followed him down the hallway, louder this time, no one bothering to hide their shock. Inside her office, he told Glory everything. The money, the name, the woman before him who'd loved his wealth and warmed to him quickly, only to vanish the moment a name with a bigger fortune and a bigger title started calling, proof in his eyes that he'd simply been a placeholder until someone better came along. He told Glory about the disguise he'd worn just to know, once, if someone could care about him with nothing to gain from it. She had already answered that question. She just hadn't known she was being asked. After that conversation, the flowers started arriving at her office, not once but every week, sometimes with a tray of native food beside them, always with the same small card, from the lying beggar. It became something she looked forward to without admitting it, a quiet rhythm between the fights and the forgiving. Months later, Glory's company was chasing a contract that could change everything for her. She brought her best numbers, her best team, everything she had. She was turned down anyway. Word came back to her quietly afterward. The man awarding the contract, Hyunwoo, didn't think a black-owned company could hold a client base like that, no matter what her numbers said. She said nothing about it to Seo-jun. What she didn't know was that Hyunwoo happened to be an old childhood friend of his. During a visit between old friends, her company's name came up. Hyunwoo hesitated. "Her numbers are solid, but this needs a certain trust. I don't know if a black-owned company can carry something this size." Seojun's response was flat and immediate. "You just told me the numbers are solid. So what exactly are you unsure about?" Hyunwoo didn't have a real answer. "Just old habits dressed up as caution." "You either awarded on merit," Seo-jun said, "or you admit you're doing something else. I won't tell you which to pick. But I'll remember which one you did." Call was made before he left the room. Not long after, the award notice landed in Glory's inbox. She read it twice, certain someone had made a mistake. A delivery arrived not long after. The same flowers, the same food, the same card, from the lying beggar. Curious and needing answers, she went to finalize the contract in person, stopping mid-step at the office door when she saw Seo-jun standing near the window with that same easy posture he always carried. Hyunwoo greeted her warmly this time, nothing like their first meeting. "I have to be honest," he said, signing the final page. "I wasn't sure about your company at first, but my friend looked into it with me and assured me your company was more capable than the others. I trust his judgment. I hope I can trust you too." She turned toward the window. Seo-jun was watching her, waiting to see what she'd do with what she now understood. She waited until they were alone. "You knew him. You knew about this contract. Why didn't you tell me?" He told her plainly. He hadn't wanted her thinking she'd won anything through him instead of through her own work. Something about the quiet way he handled it reminded her of something else. "That story," she said slowly. "About Min-jun. That wasn't luck, was it?" "I didn't want you carrying that fight by yourself," he finally said. "You'd already carried enough of it in silence." He reached for her hand then, more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "Have dinner with me. Properly. Not as the beggar, not in a boardroom, not with anyone watching. Just us. Let me take you somewhere I've been planning for weeks." She didn't say yes to anything that same day. She told him she needed the night to sit with everything, and she meant it. The mansion, the contract, the nickname that had somehow become the realest thing between them. By morning, she had her answer. 3 words sent before she could talk herself out of it. "I'm ready." That evening, Seo-jun came to her house himself instead of sending a car. Her parents opened the door before she could, and the look on her mother's face when she saw who was standing there was something Glory would remember for the rest of her life. Not confusion, but disbelief mixed with joy, the kind reserved for a possibility they never dared to suggest, let alone imagine, when they'd been listing conglomerate sons over Sunday tea. "Seo-jun Kong," her father said slowly, recognition dawning, then extending his hand with something close to reverence. "I didn't know you were the one she—" "We'll explain everything, Dad," Glory said quickly, laughing despite herself, pulling Seo-jun gently toward the door before her parents could start planning a wedding on the spot. He took her somewhere private that night, a stretch of beach cleared just for the two of them, no crowds, no cameras, torches lining the sand instead of streetlights. Dinner was already waiting when they arrived, and when the first dish came out, she stared at it in disbelief. "How did you know this was my favorite?" she asked. "I've never told you this." He smiled, pulling out her chair for her. "You reposted it once. Your bucket list. Eat this on a quiet beach before I turn 30. I've had that saved for months, waiting for the right night." She laughed, shaking her head, something warm settling behind her ribs. Later, with the tide rolling in quietly behind them and no bodyguards, no mansion, no disguises left standing between them, Seo-jun took her hand across the small table and asked her the only question that mattered. She said yes. 2 weeks after that night, Seo-jun brought her home, properly this time, no gate left unopened, no wing of the house left unexplained. His father, thinner than the photos Glory had seen online but with eyes that missed nothing, watched her from his chair as she walked in, and for a long moment no one said anything at all. "So, this is her," he finally said, voice frail but warm. "Come, sit. Tell me, how did the two of you actually meet? My son is usually far too guarded to let anyone close this fast." Glory glanced at Seo-jun, unsure how much to say, but he answered for both of them. "I was sitting outside a plaza near her office," he said, "dressed like I had nothing. I wanted to see if anyone could still look at a person and not their pockets. She did. She bought me food, sat with me, asked my name like it actually mattered to her. She had no idea who I was for months." His father's eyebrows lifted slightly, amused despite himself. "You let my son beg on the street to test you people?" He shook his head, chuckling. "Only a Kong would think of something so foolish and call it wisdom." "I didn't know I was being tested," Glory said, smiling. "I just knew he looked like he needed a meal." "That," his father said, "is exactly the kind of answer that tells me he chose well." He reached for her hand, held it between both of his grip weaker than it should have been but no less sincere. "Take care of him. And let him take care of you. That's all I ask before I go." He paused, studying her face a moment longer. "Now tell me, when do we get to meet your parents? I'd like to fix a wedding date while I still have the strength to dance at it." His mother laughed through sudden tears, swatting his shoulder gently for the joke that wasn't really a joke, then pulled Glory into a hug she hadn't been expecting, whispering thank yous that had nothing to do with the wedding and everything to do with relief. A week later, it was Glory's turn. She brought Seo-jun home for a dinner her mother had been planning since the morning after the beach, insisting on cooking herself despite having staff for exactly that purpose. Her father stood when Seo-jun walked in, sizing him up the way he sized up every business partner he'd ever met, searching for a weakness he never found. "Sit, sit," her father said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Before anything else, how did you two actually meet? My daughter has never once mentioned a name to us, not until you showed up at that door." Seo-jun exchanged a brief look with Glory before answering honestly. "I disguised myself as a beggar, sir. I'd been hurt before by someone who only wanted my name and my money, so I stopped using both for a while, just to see who would still be kind to me with nothing to gain from it." "Your daughter was?" Her father set down his glass slowly, studying him. So you tested her. I didn't mean to trap her in anything, Seo-jun said. I just needed to know the truth before I gave anyone my heart again. She passed without even trying to. Her father was quiet for a moment, then let out a short, surprised laugh. You're the one who fixed that contract, aren't you? The one Yeonwoo almost turned down. I made sure it was judged fairly, Seo-jun said. Your daughter did the rest herself. Her father studied him a moment longer, then extended his hand fully. Chief Balogun's son could never have done that. Pause, then the smallest smile. Welcome to the family, Seo-jun. He held the handshake a beat longer, his tone turning warmer, almost teasing. So, when are we meeting your parents? Your father and I have a wedding date to argue about. Her mother didn't wait for formalities. She hugged him the way she'd hugged Glory as a child, tight and certain, whispering that she'd known, from the moment she saw his face at the door that first night, that he was different from every name they'd ever tried to match her daughter with. Glory watched the two families settle into easy conversation around the table, watched years of worry and waiting dissolve into something simpler, relief and the quiet joy of two parents finally seeing their only child looked after by someone who'd chosen her before he ever told her who he was. So if you followed Glory from that window she almost knocked on, through every disguise, every quiet act of loyalty, every parent finally getting the answer they'd been waiting years for, you already know this wasn't just a love story. It was two people proving, piece by piece, that they could be loved for exactly who they were and nothing else. If this is the kind of story that stays with you long after it ends, don't just scroll past it. Share it with someone who still believes love like this exists. Drop a comment telling me which scene hit you hardest and follow along because stories like Glory and Seo-jun's are exactly what's coming next.